Happy New Year, Dennis.
Happy New Year to you.
Tonight, the state of our state from the man in charge of it all, Arizona Governor Doug Ducey.
Let's have consumers make the choice of how they want to get home from the airport, and let's not hike their taxes while they're doing it. Like the example of when I used Sandra Day O'Connor, and she wouldn't have been qualified to teach government in high school in Arizona. So would you call that unqualified?
Like an extreme example.
This will be up to the people. This is totally up to the people.
My one-on-one with the governor. That's all right now on Politics Unplugged.
And good evening, I'm political editor Dennis Welch. This is Politics Unplugged, and this past week, Governor Ducey gave his State of the State address kicking off the 2020 Arizona legislative session. Now, following that address, I went to the Capitol and sat down with the governor to talk about everything from the economy to the rideshare tax at Sky Harbor. But we led off with education.
All right. Thanks a lot for sitting down with us here today, Governor. I would want to start with education. I know we're pressed with time, but let's start with education. You know, it's the biggest thing that government spends, over 40% out of the general fund. Obviously, it's an important issue with a lot of folks here in Arizona. I want to start with that and ask you, this budget, do you think this does enough with education to complete what you've been doing?
Well, we're going to do more with education. There's always going to be more needed for education, but we've gone from $4.5 billion additional for K-12 education in previous budgets. In this budget, it'll rise to $6.6 billion in terms of new investments. We're going to complete the 20% teacher pay raise. We're taking dollars and focusing it where the low-income achievement gap exists. So there's always going to be more that needs to be done. We're trying to close this teacher gap, but we're making significant improvements year over year, and that's one of the things I'm most proud of, is that we have a consistent, sustainable spending plan in Arizona that puts the state in a good position and improves education.
Yeah, you mentioned teachers. There's still about 1,800 unqualified teachers in classrooms here today. Did the 20%?
You mean unfilled teachers?
Yeah. Oh, well, it's 18. I guess, unqualified in the classroom. They're not qualified to teach that. Has the
like the example of when I used Sandra Day O'Connor, and she wouldn't have been qualified to teach government in high school in Arizona.
So would you call that unqualified? That's like an extreme example.
Oh, you think there's
no Sandra Day
O'Connor? Could you teach journalism?
Well, I could teach journalism.
Okay. Do you have a teaching certificate?
I do not have a teaching certificate, but there's no Sandra Day O'Connor in the classroom today. I don't think
there's a lot of talented people in Arizona that would like to help at the front of the classroom. We've given the ability to principals or superintendents to make that decision.
Okay, so I was going to say then, you know, you're okay with having those types of people in the classroom if they're unqualified.
These are the types of people that are oftentimes hired at a Basis or a Great Hearts. Basis was called by U.S. News and World Report the top public high school in the nation. So I think if you have a qualified person who's getting results and outcomes, and I want to say about our public district teachers, we're the only state in the nation, or one of the only states in the nation, that are showing academic improvements in the past decade. That's a testament to the teachers that are in the classroom, and they're making that happen. Let's leave the decision to the principal or the superintendent.
Okay, let's talk about something. You'd also, in your speech, you talked about no taxes, not in this session, not next session, not in the ballot box.
Yes.
Given that, you were giving your speech the same day the Invest in Ed initiative was filed. Should that get on the ballot, are you going to fight against that?
Yes, we don't need any additional taxes in the state of Arizona. And since you brought it up, it wasn't given the same day, it was given after. So the folks that want to raise taxes in the state of Arizona couldn't even wait to see what the state of the state said or what the budget release delivered. No matter what it said, they were going to hike taxes. We don't need it. We've got $1 billion balance in our general fund, $1 billion surplus in our rainy day fund. The estate, well, it is being used for education. Yes, it is, Dennis. You need to read the budget.
It wasn't last year.
Yes,
because
it was.
It just is sitting in account, the rainy day fund.
We're going to. Well, Dennis, this is just responsible budgeting when you have a rainy day fund. Do you remember the downturn? You were here in 2009. Education had to be cut. Teachers couldn't get raises. That's not going to happen in the next downturn. Okay, we're prepared. Our economy is diversified. We've got more manufacturing jobs than we do home building jobs. This is a different state than we were, and we're prepared for whatever's coming, and we're putting additional dollars in K-12 education and getting results.
So what are we looking at then after you release your budget on Friday? We're taping actually before that. So what happens afterwards? What are we going to see? Are we going to see spending education above those pre-recession levels?
Well, I mentioned in the State of the State that we're actually going to have accelerated full restoration of additional assistance 2 years ahead of schedule. So we're thinking that, of course, there's always going to be more that's needed in K-12 education, but we're proud of this budget and the direction that we're going and the results that our teachers are achieving.
Okay, let's move on a little bit to the economy. That was a big part of your speech. 350,000 jobs since you've taken office. However, we ran a story recently that showed that Arizona's economy, the unemployment rate here, is higher than most of our neighbors. Care to respond to that?
Our economy's booming. Okay, we've got more jobs available than we have people to fill them. The number that shows a better indication of how our economy is doing is, one, the number of new jobs added, 350,000. We're leading the nation in terms of increase in personal income. So our citizens are also getting a raise, and our labor participation rate is rising.
So we've cut taxes. We've,
You know, Dennis, the other thing is we're one of the fastest growing states in the nation. Arizona's the #1 inbound state in the country. Maricopa County, fastest growing county. Phoenix, fastest growing city. So if all these other states that you mentioned are doing so much better than us, why are people moving here?
Well, I look at the unemployment rates, 4.7% here in Arizona, which is good. It's better than when you took over, but it's not as good as, again, some of the neighboring states out there. And one of the biggest blocks of people who are having trouble finding jobs are 18 to 24-year-olds. 1 in 4 can't find a job. Does that say that your policies aren't working for younger people?
In the state of Arizona, as I said, there are more jobs available than people to fill them. Now, I meet with a lot of young people. None of them are telling me they can't find a job. I meet with a lot of employers. Many of them tell me that they can't find an employee, or they need to get in a bidding war to hire an employee. I think that's good because that means wages are rising.
Does it say something about college's education under your watch, that you've got 1 in 4 young people, 18 to 24, can't find a job, and you're also saying there are more jobs open but not enough qualified people to fill them?
I think that you're taking apples and oranges and taking these statistics and, you know, Dennis, what you're saying is not what I'm seeing when I'm out talking to the citizens, and I'm out and about nearly every day.
Okay, what can be done then to help the 18 to 24-year-olds? Are you doing anything this year in this budget to help them, help education, help them pay for college, help them get training?
Well, we're doing everything we can so that we can maintain affordable tuition at Arizona State University, U of A, and NAU. We're pumping money into our community colleges. We've got more dollars to trade and CTE programs, which are the shop positions of today, you know, vocational certificates, where there's openings in those categories as well. What you're referencing in terms of difficulty in the economy and finding a job is news to me.
All right, fair enough. Let's move on. You also mentioned Uber and Lyft. Yeah, you know, you've been a big fan of the ride shares and the sharing economy out there. You talked, you said, quote, "Now all we need is Uber and Lyft back at Sky Harbor." That's obviously a reference to what's going on in the city of Phoenix. Why on earth should the state get involved in local affairs?
Well, the airport is the way that people come to the state of Arizona. It is an invaluable asset for Arizona, and I'm going to speak out about bad public policy. I don't want to see our state become one of these places that is, you know, making it inconvenient for people who land at Sky Harbor, may be counting on an Uber or Lyft, and it's not available. I'm going to continue to speak out on it.
Well, you know, ride shares now make up 70% of the commercial traffic out there now, and we've got some numbers here recently that show that since ride share started operating there in like 2016, accidents have significantly gone up. It was just over 100 accidents out at Sky Harbor, I believe, in 2015. It's now nearly 200 out there. part of the reason that for these fees is they are trying to relieve congestion, relieve some of those accidents there, and have Uber and Lyft pay their fair share for use of the airport. Why is that bad policy?
Let's have consumers make the choice of how they want to get home from the airport, and let's not hike their taxes while they're doing it.
Would you support legislation then if it was offered here that would, severely restrict what cities and towns could do regarding ride shares? I know you don't comment on pending legislation. There is none that I know of right now, but is this an idea you would get behind?
So it's a hypothetical. I mean, of course I'm going to do everything within the power of the governor's office to make sure we have good public policy going forward and that the state is seen in the most attractive light. And when there's an issue that we think we can stop or should stop or speak out on, we're going to do that. I think Uber and Lyft being able to operate at the airport is convenient for our citizens, the visitors to our state, and I think it makes us a safer state as well because it gives a no excuse for someone to be impaired and get behind the wheel.
And that was just the beginning. We also went over some other big issues, including the closure of the Florence Prison, sanctuary cities, and the controversial traffic stop involving DPS Director Frank Milstead. That's all next when Politics Unplugged returns.
Frank Milstead is one of the good guys. He's been in law enforcement his entire life.
And welcome back to Politics Unplugged. Let's get right back to my one-on-one with Governor Ducey with the topic shifting to the Florence Prison.
Okay, now you made a big splash too. Some of the one of the biggest pieces in your speech that got a lot of attention was the closing down of the Florence Prison. This is the place that houses death row inmates. You say it's going to save $300 million for the state. How did you come about deciding that that was the prison that was going to be shuttered?
So this prison was built in 1908. Think Shawshank Redemption. With what's happened in the state through the downturn, there's been a lot of neglect. You know, the upkeep that is necessary in a facility this large, with the focus on public safety, and that's always going to be our #1 concern. But with the shuttering of this prison, we're going to be able to save taxpayers $274 million over 3 years and improve public safety in our state. So it's something we think is the right thing to do, and it will also allow us to streamline the Department of Corrections, Rehabilitation, and Reentry.
Okay, now in a briefing we got about this, some of your staff said that some of these inmates are going to be going to potentially private prisons, but they didn't know how many at the time. Have you got a better idea since then on how much the private prison industry could benefit financially from this decision?
We're going to work with both, of course, our state prisons and the other prison options available. This is about public safety, and it's about saving taxpayer dollars, and that's what we're going to stay focused on.
Well, it's funny you bring up saving taxpayer dollars, but you know what evidence do we have that private prisons actually save the state money? There was a report issued by the Department of Corrections back in 2010 that showed just the opposite, that private prisons actually cost more money. Now, we don't have much data on that sense because in 2012, the legislature passed a bill that said private prisons don't have to do this cost study analysis.
Well, I've been here since 2015.
Sure,
and in 2020, we're going to save taxpayers $274 million over the next 3 years by shutting this prison.
Yeah, on the prison, I get that, but like if you're putting them in private prison, I mean, is that going to be saving?
We work with both options that we have available to the state. We're also working with local sheriffs and county jails so that we can keep people locked up that shouldn't be out on the street, allow them to pay their debt and serve their time, and then put them in a position where they can make a better choice and have a better life upon release.
And some prison reform advocates were concerned that your speech didn't talk too much about sentencing reduction and reform in that end, that shutting a prison down doesn't mean that anybody goes home, that the prison population goes down. Last year there was some legislation introduced by Walt Blackman that, had it been enacted, would reduce the population by an estimated 8,000 inmates. Are you looking at prison reform and reducing the population.
I'm looking at reducing recidivism, which will reduce the population. I'm open-minded to good ideas. If people inside prison make good decisions, achieve a GED or college credits, or have some type of industry certificate, that we can talk about that. But my first concern is always going to be for the victims. And people in Arizona, if they break the law, are going to serve their time and pay their debt. And
some of the same reform advocates were concerned too that you're shutting down the Florence Prison, which is an area that is closer to an urban core. It's easier for families to go visit their loved ones that happen to be incarcerated here. Why not shutter some of the other prisons?
Like I said, it was built in 1908. The cost benefit of what it would take to repair and bring it up to standard, there was hundreds of millions of dollars cost savings to the hardworking taxpayers of Arizona, and we made the decision.
All right. And you also talked about sanctuary cities during this speech, and you're making an effort to get this on the ballot. Obviously, a political choice. Like, why is this needed statewide? I think is the basic question.
It's a good question. Why did people bring it to Tucson? This is something that I think will bring the state together. Both Democrats and Republicans voted against this by, I think it was a 70% margin in terms of defeat. Yet in 560 other American cities, they have moved this into law. People are trying to bring this to the state of Arizona, and this November all Arizonans will have the opportunity to say yes to the rule of law and no to sanctuary cities, and to enshrine it in our Constitution.
Yeah, but Tucson is known as a much more liberal area. They overwhelmingly rejected it. Again, I mean, why does this needed to be right now? You said this is going to bring
Arizona. This will be up to the people. This is totally up to the people.
Yeah, you just said it's going to bring the state together on this issue, but couldn't this be argued that this is a raw political move on your part to bring out more people who are concerned with immigration, who tend to be Republicans, out to the polls in November?
No, it will be left to the people to decide. As governor, I don't want to see these bad out-of-state policies that people are trying to import into Arizona come here, and this is one way to stop this once and for all.
All right. And keeping with immigration, you saw that there's been some questions raised about the border strike force. There was a report in the Arizona Republic that seemed to hint at that this was just a campaign issue that you brought up with in 2018, and that you haven't talked a lot about.
This is something we've been doing since 2015. This is something, I don't have all the statistics committed to memory, but in terms of the methamphetamine, the fentanyl, the cocaine, the illegal ammunition, they've had great success here. We're going to continue to focus on this. I mean, our southern border right now isn't the crisis that it's been at certain points over the time of my governorship. Part of that is because we have the National Guard there. We've got more of a focus from the federal government. But our border strike force is going to continue to coordinate with local law enforcement and county sheriffs to make sure that we're stopping dangerous drugs, human trafficking, and the cartels that are trying to sell this poison in our state.
So, yeah, I believe, too, from the article, it was you were supposed to be, get the staffing for the border strike force to certain levels. It hasn't made that there. Is there going to be a change with that this year?
I'm not familiar with the article that you're talking about, but these are questions that you can ask to the Department of Public Safety, who we're increasing funding to, and Colonel Frank Milstead is in charge of the border strike force. And like I said, the results that we've seen today have been positive and encouraging, along with more improvement at the border, and more needs to be done there.
You brought up Colonel Frank Milstead. One question I still have is, the speeding issue from about a month ago. You'd said he who is driven, not speeded, cast the first stone. But I think a lot of folks weren't concerned with the fact that he was speeding. He was concerned with the fact that he pulled rank during that stop. Same deal with, former Representative Paul Mosley, and you called for major changes, to the Constitution.
This is apples and oranges.
Why is that?
This is apples and oranges. Paul Mosley was abusing an immunity, and I did speak out on it. Frank Milstead is one of the good guys. He's been in law enforcement his entire life. His father was in law enforcement before him. Dennis, we're talking about a speeding ticket.
No, we're not talking about the speeding ticket. We're talking about pulling rank here. Paul Mosley pulled rank, tried to invoke immunity. Frank Milstead.
I've said what I'm going to say on this issue.
And coming up next, I'm going to be joined by a special panel to discuss one of those hot topics in that interview, criminal justice reform. We'll be right back.